Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today I want to talk about the Lumix G9 Mark II. Let's get started. So I've had this camera in for a few days now and I'm just loving this camera. I mean, actually today's video was going to be titled something like Amazing Things the Lumix G9 Mark II will do, but the weather has not been cooperating. In fact, the weather's not supposed to cooperate for the rest of the week, so we're going to have to be kind of flexible in the videos. I'm still trying to get the exposure triangle video out, but I need to be outside for a lot of that, so the time date on that is still kind of iffy. But let me tell you something I was thinking the other day about the G9 Mark II. I've got it, you know, anytime you get a new camera, you want to get into the menu and learn all the new cool stuff. And I got to thinking, 2 years ago, if somebody would have said, you're going to have a micro four thirds camera that you're going to absolutely love, I would have thought, well, you're crazy. I am a full frame guy, I shoot weddings, I need that low light. And I got to thinking about that. In fact, I talked to a photographer the other day that I've worked with for years. And about a month ago, I'd kind of sown a seed with him about the Lumix G9 Mark II. He's a Nikon guy, full frame, and his camera's broke. Of course, it's a Nikon. I'm just kidding. All you Nikon guys don't have to email me. I'm just kidding. Nikon makes great stuff. And I mentioned to him, you know, check out the Lumix G9 Mark II. And a couple of weeks later, I talked to him. I think I talked to him last week or week before. And we were talking about cameras. And I said, hey, did you have a chance to check out that G9 Mark II? And he said, oh, that's that camera, that little sensor. I'd never consider that one. And I thought that's funny because that would have been the exact words I would have told somebody 2 years ago. I found the G9 Mark II, the Lumix, from starting the YouTube channel. I got them to get into video. And then from there, I started falling in love with the photography and everything that they will do. And it all keeps happening. And it probably does to you too. If I say, what's the difference between a micro four thirds camera and a Canon full frame? You're probably thinking low light. Obviously, low light. You got to be able to shoot at 12,800 low light. So that put me thinking about something else. You know, the first 20 years of my career, we shot film, and I shot weddings, shot hundreds of weddings. And in those 20 years, I don't ever remember buying any film that was higher than Konica 3200. And even then, you knew when you bought your Konica 3200 that you were going to get a little grain with it. Now that's 3200. Now, I shoot this thing at 12,800. They didn't even make film, as far as I know, and never have, and may never make film that's 12,800 that you can put in a camera. So I got thinking, how much of a need for these extreme high ISOs are there in reality? If I spent 20 years shooting weddings and never bought any film higher than Konica 3200, how did we do it back in the day? What did we do? If you're shooting say a Catholic wedding at nighttime by candlelight, oh, you got to have 12,800. But we used to do it, and most of the time I wasn't even using the Konica 3200. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to compare side by side low light. I mean, we know this camera will give you better results in low light, and there's also topaz and things you can fall back on. But straight out of the camera, with no extra software, how important is low light? So I'm going to run some tests just to see what this will do in low light right out of the camera. Because I'm thinking, how do we survive for 20 years with only being able to buy film as high as 3200? And 90% of the time I was buying usually Fuji 400 medium format film. And I just got to thinking, I'm like, how did we get by without these extreme ISOs? So in reality, and I wouldn't even go into the fact that this camera has 8 stops of image stabilization. I was hand holding 1 second shots the other day. Hand holding them. Perfect, no blur. And you know, 1 second is a long time. When you're holding a camera and click, click, that's a lot of time for any slight movement to blur your image. But in here, I wasn't getting any blur at all. They were razor sharp at 1 second handheld images. Now, I'm still going to make that cool video about some of the really cool stuff that I didn't even know was in this camera that I know now that I can't wait to show you guys. But I need to be outside for that. So as soon as the weather clears up, we're going to get that video going. But today's video, I want to see what I can get in low light with this camera and how it looks just right out of the camera. So I'm going to go to the studio upstairs and I'm just going to shoot some low light images. I'm not going to run them through Topaz. I'm not going to do anything special to them. I just want to see what they look like at the different ISOs. Like I said, I'm not going to compare them to the full frame because we know full frame you can go crazy with your ISO on it. But like I said, I was thinking for 20 years I shot weddings and rarely had any film higher than 3200. And I'm not knocking the Konica film. Konica film is fantastic, especially when we had our lab and we were using Konica paper. Konica paper with Konica film is amazing. I loved that combination, but not much need for it anymore since we're shooting digital. But let's check out the ISO on here, what it looks like straight out of the camera without any topaz or anything. We just want to see what it looks like to see just how usable it is. I'm not even going to shoot at 1 second. I'm going to handle, because the 1 second shots are great, but your subject has to be still during that. So even with the 8 stops of IBIS in the camera, if I'm shooting a bride and groom from a distance and they're rocking back and forth at all or moving a little bit, it'll blur no matter how long I can hand hold this, because if your subject moves during that 1 second, you're going to be had. So you've got to be shooting a static object to make that work. So I'm going to stop rambling now, and I'm going to test some high ISO shots in here and show them to you guys, and we'll talk about what they look like. So let's get busy. Okay, so we're in the studio, and I am going to start this. I'm shooting with the Lumix G9 Mark II at ISO 800. I'm at 1/60th of a second at f1.7, and then I'll adjust everything so that I can keep the exposure correct and go up on the ISO as we go. But we'll start out here at 800. Actually, I'm going to start it down at 400. It looks a little bit bright on there, so let's go to 400. So our first shot here is 400, 1/60th of a second, f1.7. So now we'll go to 800. All right, there's 800. Now we'll jump up to 1600. These are full stops that I'm jumping. This one I have to turn the shutter speed up a little bit. Otherwise it's going to come out looking a little overexposed. But I'm testing ISO here, so that's what's important. So this is 1/200th of a second, f1.7, ISO 1600. All right, from there we will jump up to 3200. This is like similar to the Konica film that I mentioned earlier. 3200. Now we'll go up to 6400. That's another full stop jump. Have to take the shutter speed up to a 1/640 over f1.7, 6400 ISO. And then we'll jump up one more full stop to 12,800. And I'll have to adjust the shutter speed to 1/1600th of a second. So that's pretty fast ISO, but like I said, we're doing an ISO test here. So ISO 1200 coming up. All right, so let's go take a look at these and see what we got. There you go, guys. I am pretty impressed with that. I think up to 6400 straight out of the camera, even at a 200% crop, still looked better than I thought. And even with that 6400, if you go back to comparing back to the film days, I know it's not exact, but the Konica 3200, that's twice as high as the film we had back then. And I think even at a 200% crop, the 6400 looked good straight out of the camera. And that doesn't even count if I was to run it through Topaz. I think the 12,800 might be usable with Topaz. But again, don't always depend on programs like Topaz to save. You always try to get it right in the camera the first time. And I say that about everything, not just with the ISO, but you always, well, your goal needs to be get it right out of the camera the first time. Always shoot for the best shot in your camera. Always think in the back of your head, this is it. Whatever I get in the camera can't be fixed. Go in with that mentality, and that'll save you so much work in the long run. Get it right in camera, and you'll save so much time and having to do all these other programs, and you'll be a better photographer for it. But I'm pretty impressed with this little Lumix G9 Mark II. And that's just the ISO. Like I said, when I make this video showing you guys some of the cool stuff, now some of it I thought was very cool, but I can't find a use for it. Like there was one thing in here, it was called, let's see if I can find it. It was called, I'll never find it, the menu's huge, but it was some kind of image stabilization scope where you can set it on a tripod and it stays very still. But you know, sometimes when we handhold stuff, we're thinking, man, I'm really holding this camera still, but you can see just the slightest movement, it goes all over the place. I'm not sure what that would be used for other than to show you we can't really hold it as still as we think we can. I'm sure there's a use somewhere. Like I said, I'm still learning some of the details of this camera, but I am thoroughly impressed with it so far. I was telling my wife the other night, if I could only choose one, the R6 or the G9 II, which one would I take? This one is really catching up with the R6 in a hurry. I won't say at this point in time because I haven't had this long enough to say yet. I mean, the Canon R6 is a fantastic camera, not slamming on it at all. But like I said, 2 years ago, if you'd have told me I would have been loving a micro four thirds camera, I would have thought you would have been drinking a little bit too much. But things change, and I try to keep an open mind about things. I'm really glad I discovered the Lumix camera. I mean, I knew they were there, but I'd never really gotten into the micro four thirds just because the sensors were so small. But it does so much else, and I can't wait to get to the video to show you guys some of just the cool stuff that this thing will do in camera. It's just the coolest little camera ever. In a few months, maybe I can tell you which one I would rather have if I could only have one. Thank goodness I can have them both. But in a few months, I'll try to let you know if I could only have one, which one would it be. But I am thoroughly impressed with this Lumix G9 Mark II. If I like the G9 was great, but the G9 Mark II just has some abilities and some things that's just crazy. I mean, just I never even thought about it. But anyway, guys, I've rambled enough of this video. I am pretty impressed with how those images look cropped even. 400, 800, 1600 were all fantastic. 3200 was good. And like I said, even the cropped ones at 200% look pretty darn good. So anyway, with that said, let me know if you've shot with the Lumix G9 Mark II, if you got the G9 and maybe thinking about going to the G9 II. Just let me know what you guys think. And if you're one of those guys like me that full frame, this is the only way to go, like I was forever, maybe take a look, rent one of these, give it a shot. I think you'll be pretty impressed because, you know, I would have laughed you out of the room had somebody told me 2 years ago that I would be loving a micro four thirds camera. But anyway, I've said that enough. You guys get the point. But anyway, let me know what you guys think about the video. If we're helping you out, give us a big thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. If you have any questions, leave a comment down at the bottom, and my email is always at the bottom. So let us know how we can help you out. You guys have a good day. Thanks.